Is it possible to make peace with rejection?
This week, we're talking about that with actor, comedian, and podcaster Connor Ratliff.
We get into what it actually costs to be a working actor who's never quite the lead, and why losing the role to someone like Stephen Root doesn't sting the way you think it would.
And how a podcast about getting fired by one of the most beloved actors alive became more valuable to his career than the job he lost in the first place.
The creative economy is broken, but some people are still making it work. We're here to find out how. I'm Open Mike Eagle.
And I'm Anna Marie Cox, and this is Past Due. Connor, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So you are an actor, comedian, and podcaster, best known for Dead Eyes, the acclaimed podcast about what you call a very stupid mystery that haunted you for 2 decades.
Yeah, that's right.
So we're going to talk about that. But first, we have a question. We have the same question for every guest.
Yeah, we come in hot with our first question, since we're a podcast primarily about how creative folk are navigating our current economy. The question we lead every interview with is, when's the last time you were worried about covering your monthly expenses?
Oh, probably a few minutes ago.
Okay, minutes.
It's a constant concern. I mean, it's not that I'm in. You know, I try to save up. I try to keep a certain cushion, but every now and then you sort of dip below that. And at the moment, I'm ahead of it in theory, but sometimes you do things that you do them in June and you get paid for them in September.
Yeah.
Whoop.
And so I'm like, oh, in the long run, it'll all even out. But it starts to get a little bit dicey because you sort of dip below that sort of, there's like a line I think we all have in our bank account where we're like, as long as I'm above this line, I don't need to worry. And anytime I dip below that line, I'm like, okay, not terrified, but can't really, nothing can go wrong. You know what I mean? There can't suddenly be a surprise, you know?
Yeah. We don't have to talk specific numbers, but I'll tell you, because I'm in the middle of a, like, I have the money now, but the next 2 months look real iffy. And so I'll just give you a multiple. If I dip below what I would say is 5 weeks, that's when I get real panicky.
Yeah. And I'm one of those, my dad's the type of guy who always wants to get to the airport 3 hours early.
Right.
Same here. And I'm that person.
Same.
He's that way about savings as well. And my mom was the type who was very like, we have to spend this money. We need this. She was the type that was like, well, we need these things. I mean, that was always the type that was like, we need to save for a rainy day. And my mom was always like, it's raining. We need to spend it now. And I think I have that combination because I have the tendency to be like, well, I need this now. And it's just it'll be okay, but this is like an important expense or it's an investment in, you're like betting on yourself. Like I started making, I wrote a book recently that is a companion to an improv show that I do. And it's one of those things where to print 100 copies of this book cost, X amount of money that I'm like, well, eventually if I sell all the books of my shows, I'll make a few $100s profit. So I won't lose money. But right now it very much feels like I have lost money.
Right.
And I'm not very good at that long-term thinking. It scares me whenever I have to invest in something, even if I know like this will pay itself off in the long run. It's planning is always nerve-wracking, and especially planning that has to do with money. Every year as an actor, I'm always in danger of losing my SAG health insurance. And this year is the first, there's no rollover for it. So it's not like I can do really, really well one year and then I'm good. It's a yearly thing where the second I know I qualify, I'm already thinking about, well, starting in, October, it starts again. I got it. Like any work that I book now I've already qualified for next year's insurance. So now if I book a job, I'm like, oh, couldn't it have been in October when it would count for the 2028 health insurance?
Right.
So like that's sort of like I'm not good at math or practical things or I'm good at funny stuff, creative stuff. I'm not good at the business side of being a creative person, and I'm always worried that I've fouled it up somehow.
I think one of the things that you're speaking to, and it's sort of a consistent circumstance for just about everybody we talk to, is that most of us have made the choice not to be, in corporate America, where you're working for somebody else, but the benefit of that is very dependable paycheck. We choose these creative endeavors, and yes, it's hard managing the money and managing the calendar of it, because and oftentimes we're not in control of when opportunities happen for when we get paid. And I know you do a lot of improv, you do a lot of commercial work, you do a lot of podcasting stuff. Is any piece of your pie like something approaching dependable? Is anything in there like a reliable source of income?
Well, I'm starting to try to build that, because the thing that I've noticed is that it seems to me that the people, other than people that I know who are wildly successful, like there's a handful of people that I'm friends with that I know who have had the level of success that if I were them, I feel like I would never have to worry again. Like, not to name drop, but he's someone who I'm friends with who he was on my podcast, but like Ryan Johnson is a good example of someone who like his Knives Out deal alone is the type of thing that's sort of like the kind of jackpot that there really isn't a bigger one that I can think of, where it's just like you're doing the films that you like and you're also set. And I know everything, sort of expands to fill whatever, there are people who they're doing really well, but your life expands in terms of like you need security or you need things that I don't need once you get to a certain level. So there is also that element where I feel like even at that level, there are probably people who like feel like it's going to go away or they're one bad investment away from like losing it all or something. But on a smaller level than that, I feel like the people that I know who have found a way to create something that has a sustainable audience that doesn't have to be huge. It just has to be enough that if you keep that audience interested, you kind of have something that you have some level of control over. And I look at my friends who do the Blank Check podcast.
Oh yeah.
They have sort of set up a way, like Griffin Newman, who I do the George Lucas talk show with. I do a lot of different comedy shows with. When I first met him, he was the same as me. We were both just jobbing actors who were reliant on booking acting work in order to sustain ourselves. And Blank Check found its audience and found its sort of like Patreon subscriber level fan base that's growing in a way that feels like it's going to last. It's not a fly by night thing. They're, for every fan or listener they might lose, I feel like they gain two. They're in that nice rhythm where they're creating a thing that they have full control over. It's just a small operation. So it only has to do, if you're doing a network TV show, you have to get a certain amount of money to sustain the amount of staff and the amount of resources and the amount of all the different things. It has to be big. Whereas something like a really, really successful independent podcast, the goal isn't mega million listeners. You can build something sustainable at a very realistic level. And that's sort of where I've been looking at that. Like, I've been doing this one person improv show for the past couple of years. It's called Connor Ratliff Presents the Acting Class. And it's sometimes it's me with a guest. Mostly it's me by myself, but I can kind of tour it wherever I want. Any place that's willing to let me do a show and maybe a couple of improv workshops, I can go a place and make my rent, a couple of shows a month. And what I've been doing over the past couple of years is trying to go as many different places as I can and see if I can kind of build a circuit that I can repeat every year or two, where if I can go to Philly once a year, if I can go to Austin once a year, it's sort of like building a thing that doesn't depend on a big corporation. And if one of those theaters in one of those towns closes, if I can find 20 or 30 places, then I have more than one place a month I can go to. And so I've kind of been trying to do that. I'm trying to do something that it's just me, and it's just as long as people are interested, and it's sort of building on the success of the Dead Eyes podcast, because I'm just being myself. So what I'm drawing from is that same pool of narrative and experience as an actor that made Dead Eyes interesting to a lot of people. And so that's sort of been that's been the thing that in the past couple of years, I sort of looked around and realized I don't want to just depend on being the right person for a role. Because if you're just an actor waiting for a commercial or a movie or a TV gig, you know, having just seen Disclosure Day, there was that I put myself on tape for that. I was so excited to be auditioning for a Spielberg movie. And, you know, most of the time, what always happens, you go see the movie and you're like, oh, that's who they got for it. I'm like, good choice. But it's like, that's kind of a scary thing is I have very rarely have I lost a role and then looked at the screen and thought they made a mistake. Look who they got. It's always, there was someone that was slightly better for the role than me. And that's not an insult to myself, because that's also true of every role I booked. There's someone else who was just a little bit less appropriate for the role than I was usually. And that's a very vulnerable place to be, because it's relying on being the right person, you know, X number of times out of however many, you know, you're constantly auditioning for things. And very rarely, there are some people who are almost always the person that you want for the role. You know, there are actors that are being fought over, you know, everyone wants Coleman Domingo in their movie. There's no, and yet there probably was that he's losing out to someone. There's probably every actor that has some other actor that's like, they got the part that I want. No matter how great they are, there's always one other actor that's like, I'm up against this guy. I don't know who the guy is for Coleman, but there's somebody that he's like, oh, okay, I would have liked to do that, you know?
I have to ask who it is in Disclosure. I just saw it. I did not particularly like it. So I have to ask, like, who the person is in Disclosure Day. That
well, there were two different parts, because I'm going to literally look up the sides from the email in my because when I auditioned for it, it was untitled Spielberg project, but it was one of the people who works in the TV station in Kansas City, which I grew up in.
Accurate part of the whole movie that really, as a journalist, like I got so mad at the whole local news part of it.
I grew up in Jefferson City, Missouri. So, you know, losing out on a, and my dad works as a weatherman at KRCG 13, TV 13, a much smaller market than Kansas City. But I've been around local TV in Missouri, and there's maybe never going to be another Spielberg film that has a part that is more appropriate for me. It's literally the station manager, the guy who's her boss at the TV station.
Oh yeah,
and it's played by Jeremy Shamos, who is a big Broadway actor. He was in Better Call Saul. He was in Sondheim's last musical. He was in Only Murders in the Building. Like, he's in everything. And so I'm just like, of course go with him. Like, you gain nothing by putting me in that part. And also is not a part that particularly, it's a functional kind of part. You know, it's just like, he's the guy who's like, where have you been? You're late, you know? But, you know, would have been, I mean,
it would have been a Spielberg movie. Been a
Spielberg movie, but that's also the same thing. I don't think Jeremy's been, I don't know Jeremy. I'm talking as if, I don't mean to sound as if I'm familiar. I just know him from seeing him in things, but I don't think he's ever been in a Spielberg movie, unless, you know, if I scroll and find out that he was in a Spielberg movie, then I'll know I never had a chance. You know what I mean? But I don't, but see, for him, it might also be like, I finally got to be in a Spielberg movie. Yeah, I'm not seeing any Spielberg so far. So yeah, he probably had the exact same experience that I wanted to have, which is like, oh, I'm in a Steven Spielberg film. No, like 1 million TV credits, no Spielbergs. I can't take that away from an accomplished actor getting their first Spielberg movie. I don't deserve it.
Well, that's an incredibly generous point of view.
If I don't think of it that way, the only other alternative is to be sort of like jealous about it and be like, oh, it should have been, you know what I mean? Like I have to try to feel good about it because I obviously would have liked to. I would have liked the work. I would have liked the however many days he filmed, etc. But it feels much worse when you, on the rare occasion where I've lost a part, and I'm not going to mention any specifics. There have been very few occasions where I've lost a part and then I've looked at it and I've been like, they messed up. They should have gone with me. And it feels so much worse because when I am watching Disclosure Day and I see someone like that in the part, I feel like, well, of course, it's sort of like, it just feels like, yeah, like I've lost a bunch of parts where it ends up going to someone like Stephen Root. And I'm like, there's no circumstance where I would advise someone to cast me over Stephen Root. It's just like, no, go with him. Like, and it's not low self-esteem on my part. It genuinely is just like, I'd cast Stephen Root. Like, if I had something that I was going to be an actor in that was my own project and someone said Stephen Root's available, I would immediately bail on the role and be like, no, let's get Stephen Root in there. It'll be better,
Can that kind of generosity exist beside anxiety about your finances?
Yeah, it doesn't make me any less anxious knowing that Jeremy has the money that but there's nothing I can do about it. That's the thing. Ultimately, there's nothing I can do about it. All I can do is present myself as best I can. And the only other thing I can do about it is what I'm trying to do, which is, doing a show that is built on me pretending to teach an acting class as myself with my own, I'm not playing a character where I have fake examples like, oh, when I worked with Marlon Brando or something. Anything that I talk about in the acting class improv show that I do, if I have to pull an example, I'll pull a real example. I'll probably talk about not being in Disclosure Day in the next show. So I'm like, what I get out of it is I've built a system whereby if I book work, it is material that I can use in my shows. And if I don't book work, it's material I can use in my shows. It's really the lesson I learned from Dead Eyes, which is for years, it was just like a failure, an experience that I had that I gained nothing from. It was just loss. I was going to have a good experience being in Band of Brothers. I was fired by one of my favorite actors in the world. It was just a pure negative. And eventually it became a funny story. And then I was like, well, at least I have this funny story. It was a funny get to know me story where they're like, what's your deal? Why aren't you an actor? Well, I used to be an actor. Why aren't you an actor anymore? Funny story. And then I would tell this thing and people would be like, oh my God. And then at a certain point, I was like, oh, this would be a fun podcast. And ultimately the podcast ended up being more valuable to me in my career, in my life, creatively, all of that, than if I had originally been in Band of Brothers. And the thing that I learned from that was like, I didn't have any control over whether I was in Band of Brothers cast to begin with. I didn't have any control over whether or not I ended up getting fired. It was all down to other people in a big, big machine that I was the tiniest little, ultimately inconsequential, replaceable speck within what was at the time the biggest TV miniseries of all time. And what I do have control over is my own projects and the things that I do at a much, much smaller level where the stakes are lower. But for me, the stakes are high in that like doing the show has been the thing that has sustained me when I'm not booking film or TV work or a commercial or stage work that's paid or anything like that. I'm able to like go out and do my own thing and make my own thing happen. And it's afforded me a level of self-reliance with a very, very small audience. There's a very, very small audience that's even aware that I'm doing these shows. But all I need is to go to a place and get 100 people here, 100 people there, and eventually it adds up to rent,
On this week's bonus edition of Past Due, Connor tells us about the day he spent 8 hours on a football field in Kansas City, dressed as King Henry VIII, holding a disintegrating turkey leg for a State Farm commercial.
It's the most literal answer we've ever gotten to the question of what it costs to make a living as a creative person. Hear it now at patreon.com/pastdue.
And we're live on match day as Doug reaches for a buffalo wing. He's got it! Oh, and he's gone for a can of Pepsi too! What a finish! There's no doubt about it. It just tastes better. Match days deserve Pepsi.
I mean, one of the things that I think is really fascinating about the story behind Dead Eyes is I feel like as creatives, as whether it's musician, journalist, actor, we all end up having to take a lot of what I call like quiet L's. Like when a show gets canceled or you get laid off or you don't get the part after putting a lot of work into an audition, and we take these L's and I feel like the culture that we're in, we're encouraged to kind of keep it quiet, keep pushing. You have the weird experience seeing the part at the movie theater. It's a very personal experience that you don't share often. And so the notion that you took that and, went from it being a story you tell people when you meet them, and then it decided at some point you were going to tell everybody. You were going to share this particular thing that people usually keep close to everybody. And I'm curious, in as much as you could share about it, just the thinking that went into making that decision.
I tell you, there was a moment when I was doing comedy in New York City. I was doing a lot of improv at the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater. And at a certain point, various podcast companies would invite me in and they want me to pitch if I had ideas for podcasts. And I would come in with, 5 or 6 ideas. And the last one I'd always pitch them was Dead Eyes. And that was always the one I was kind of like, I have this thing, I think it would be really interesting. And it always captivated people in the room, but then they'd kind of be like, yeah, we don't really think it's a podcast. And I was like, I think it is. I really think it would be a good, I had a vision of what it could be. And there was a moment where what I really felt was I realized that there was a way of telling the story. And part of it was because I was aware that it was no longer a traumatic story to me. I was aware of how much it was just a thing that happens. And because it happened to me, it hurt. But it was just like, the day before filming, they realized like, hey, we can do better for this little tiny part. Let's swap in someone. This guy still gets paid, but you don't have the credit or the experience. It doesn't move the ball forward career-wise. And nobody in the process of making Band of Brothers was thinking about how traumatized a young actor would be by being fired that way and they also weren't, I think not, Tom Hanks certainly wasn't aware when I went in, I don't think, that I knew what he had said about me. That was a weird communication snafu. Whereas to me, I didn't know what to make of it. I was so overwhelmed by the whole experience. There was a point where once I knew it was no longer traumatic for me and that I understood more that it was a very small story and that part of working in show business is you've got to develop a kind of thick skin about rejection. And you've got to realize that a rejection for a specific role or a job is not a disqualification. It's not it doesn't discredit or undermine your talent. It's not about you. That's the thing I realized was like, it to me, it felt like it was all about me. And the central joke of Dead Eyes is that it's comedically so narcissistic. It's like, this is so worthy of investigation. And the trick of the podcast is sort of, most of the episodes are about other people. I just keep turning it back to like, well, what does this have to do with me? But that's sort of the comedic engine of it, is me being able to turn everything into, how does this relate to me getting fired at Tom Hanks? But most of the episodes are actually about someone else or something else. And the key thing that I think I realized was that the good version of the podcast, which is the version we ended up making, I had a realization that I was like, if I try to track down Tom Hanks, and there was no guarantee I would ever get to him, but I knew there was a way of doing it that wouldn't seem like complaining, and it wouldn't seem like I was trying to make Tom Hanks into a villain. Because I think the audience wouldn't have liked that to begin with. They'd be like, we like Tom Hanks. We reject your premise. And so once I realized that there was a way of telling a story where ultimately I had this sort of epiphany, this confidence that if I get to Tom Hanks at the end of this will be good for both of us, because I'll look good, Tom Hanks will look good, people will feel good about seeing this reconciliation of sorts, because it's a thing that doesn't happen naturally in life. Very often, it's the conversation you never have with whatever person in your life wronged you or made you feel bad or something. You never have that frank, like, let's just talk about it. And at the end of the third season, when I talked to Tom Hanks, he came into that in a way where there was a director that I worked with on, it was a director on Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, where I'd done some segments on it, and he'd worked with Tom Hanks on a segment on Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. He'd directed him on like a pre-film thing, and this guy was talking to me. We were actually filming in an abandoned prison in Staten Island that's now like a filming location. But it was this very surreal location to be in, because I remember I went to film there and the Uber pulled up to what is just this very, very daunting looking abandoned prison facility. And the Uber driver was like, "This is where you're going?" I was like, yeah, I'll be fine. I just walk into this building. And I remember having this conversation. It was right after the episode had come out. And this director said to me, "I think your episode with Tom Hanks is an essential part of, if you're a fan of Tom Hanks movies, this is like a part of his filmography in a weird way. It's a part of his like body of work, because it actually is, it gives you insight into who he is as a professional and not just a persona." And that was sort of the vision I had, was like, once I knew that the thing I was building toward could be good for me and good for Tom Hanks, that's when I realized, like, oh, this is a good idea for a podcast, because I could see the destination, the ideal like endpoint for it in my sort of like view screen, you know?
I feel like we might want to tell people where the title Dead Eyes comes from. I think we've covered covered the premise of the show, which is you got fired.
Yeah.
And you got fired by Tom
It was
Hanks.
a little part. It was a little part in Band of Brothers, and I'd been cast. They'd cut my hair. I'd had the costume fitting. I was ready to film the next day. Tom Hanks was going to be directing the episode I was in. This was all exciting news to me. Everything was coming up roses as far as I was concerned. And then the day before filming, when I was getting ready to go to where I was staying, where I would be in London to film this, I was living in Liverpool at the time, and I was getting ready to get in a train down from Liverpool to London to film. And I got a call from someone in my agent's office saying, you have to get to Hertfordshire Air Base where they're filming. You need to go there this afternoon. You have to go there right away. Tom Hanks has seen your audition tape and he's having second thoughts. He thinks you have dead eyes.
Wow. And
so I had to go re-audition in person for Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks had just finished filming Castaway, which was not something that I was fully aware of. So he also looked he was skeletal. He was at his like lowest weight, but he was also stubbly because he was done shooting. So he was sort of like, he just looked very, very ill, very unwell. So it was just a very surreal experience. And the part was so small that there was really no talent I could bring that I've thought about this a lot, but there was nothing I could do in terms of acting well.
You'd have to bring new eyes, is what you would have had to have done.
And I was aware of it going in. I was just like, this character says like three words, you know, it's just like the smallest little, it's just a guy delivering the tea and sandwiches, you know? And I just knew going in, like, I don't, there's nothing I can do that will, if I had a big emotional speech or something, I could have acted in a way that might have impressed him. But even when I read the scene for him, Tom Hanks's immediate response was, "Oh, is that it? Well, I wish there were more." Like, even he was like shocked at how little the part was. But it was like, when I talked to him, one of the things he compared it to is like almost with a character like you're almost like a prop, almost like we ordered the red mugs, and then on the day when you're shooting, you're like, we actually need the blue mugs, you know?
Right.
And so it was just one of those things where so Dead Eyes being the thing that really stuck with me, because and again, when I talked to Tom Hanks, his whole thing was, he didn't remember the specific incident, but he was like, I know I have said that. That is something that I have said. I would say it. It's a thing that he admittedly, it was like, if someone says you said something and like, that's not something I would say, or like, oh yeah, that sounds like me. I've had that with improv shows where people are like, oh my God, I saw this improv show you did 10 years ago. And I'm like, I don't remember it. And then they'll quote the scene to me and I'll be like, yep, that's me. Like, that's what I would do. And he was the same as that, but he also was like, very much, this is one of the things that happens, which is just you need something else on the day, and you kind of you're making 1,000 decisions every hour, and you gotta have the confidence to know when something's right, and you can't be worrying about the feelings of, one individual day player,
Yeah. I'm very curious about, the relationship to rejection. It seems like sort of a journey you've been on, if I can be so bold, that the podcast itself was a part of, right? Like, you were talking earlier about what it seems to me such a generous attitude towards other actors. And was it always that way for you? Or has doing Dead Eyes helped you process rejection in a way that's gotten you to being able to have that generosity?
I think doing Dead Eyes solidified somewhere that I had already arrived at, which was real. Once you fully process how not personal it is and how not a reflection of your talent that rejection is, I definitely, I don't get my hopes up very often. I allow myself a little bit of, when I put myself on tape for Disclosure Day for untitled Steven Spielberg movie, I allow myself just like a little bit of like, oh, that's neat. Wouldn't that be something? But then I don't like fantasize about it. I don't think about like, oh, what would it be like? Whereas back when I booked Band of Brothers, I was fantasizing about like, oh, what if Tom's directing and he comes over and he wants to talk about the character or something? And I would fantasize about, oh, what if there's some downtime and we're like joking around?
But I imagine that's a little bit, you can allow yourself that at the booking point, but you wouldn't allow yourself that at the audition point.
Yeah. Although even now, you film something, they might cut it from the movie, like there are, if you watch deleted scenes for enough movies, you'll start to see people you're like, oh, this was a major actor. Like I was watching like deleted scenes from Silence of the Lambs, and there's a role played by the actor Philip Bosco, and like all his scenes basically got cut. And that must have felt horrible when Silence of the Lambs came out and like swept the Oscars and everybody saw it. And I'm like, he was a significant character actor, and it still probably was like, and so I was in a movie that looks to be a very good movie. People are liking it. There's a movie called Run Amok. I think I'm still in the movie, but the writer director of it told me, hey, just give you a heads up. Your part has been significantly reduced because they had to get it down to a certain running time. And my character was a character that was very easy to cut down. And the phrase that they said to me was, I'm still physically and spiritually in the movie. And I was like, oh, that might be a very nice way of saying that maybe I don't have any lines in the movie anymore. And I appreciate getting that heads up so that I don't experience like watching the movie, anticipating my 3 big scenes, And maybe I'm just there, maybe, I may just be, that's, so you can't even really get your hopes up other than enjoying the experience of like, hey, I'm in this movie and I'm working with these people and trying to like, take some satisfaction from having done it, and you try to do a good job, but like, you might not be, like there was a period, I have a very small role in the show Widow's Bay, which is
nice.
my favorite thing on TV currently. And that is a show created by a friend of mine, Katie Dippold, who's an amazing writer and a very funny improviser and talented, just so talented. And this show is such a perfect realization of her very skewed comedic vision of the world, that she is like equal parts horror and comedy. And that was a case where when they were first auditioning for the lead role, they cast a pretty wide net, and I got to audition for the lead role in that show. Now, I don't watch that show and think they should have cast me in the Matthew Rhys character.
Right.
He should win an Emmy for that. Like, it would have been life-changing, but it also might have been show destroying in terms of their, like, maybe no one would have watched it. You know what I mean? Like, it's very smart of them to have not cast me in the lead role in that show. I think I could have done the part. I think I could have done a good job. So again, it's not a reflection of my talent, but I'm not unrealistic in that launching that kind of show with a complete unknown, with a fringe improviser in the main role. And then there was so they saw me for that. And then I very quickly heard from them, like, you're no longer in, like, consider it, like, don't worry about it. You're not going to be the lead role in that. There's a point where they let you know, like, which is already, sometimes you don't know you don't have a part until you see that a thing is shooting or coming out. I then auditioned for what I believe was Jeff Hiller's part on the show. Now, Jeff Hiller has since won the Emmy, and Jeff is also a friend, and we have done like tons of improv shows together. Jeff Hiller is who, they're lucky at this point to have Jeff in that role, because he is an Emmy-winning actor at this point. And so this was shot before he won the Emmy. But he's also known Katie forever, and they've done comedy things before, worked together. And then eventually, because they obviously liked me enough to want to see me for the lead, and they liked me enough to want to see me for the part that Jeff Hiller got. And then eventually it trickled down to, we have this part of the deputy. It's like 2 lines in one scene, and then a couple of lines on a walkie-talkie where you hear me in another scene. And that's a win for me. Like, I'm part of that show. Now, you might not even notice that I'm part of the show. But there's always the possibility my character didn't die, and even if he did, that island is crawling with supernatural occurrences. Even if I was dead, I still could be in another episode of it. But I'm just glad at this point to have like just even a tiny piece of something like that is a win, because I know that people making it obviously liked me enough to keep seeing me, and then eventually found a small place for me in there. And there's no part of me that's like, oh, why aren't I a bigger part? Now, I hope they write more scenes for that deputy, but maybe they won't. They might not need to, like, it's not about me. That could easily be the only time you ever see that character. And no one watching the show will be like, whatever happened to that deputy? Like, it's at a certain point, it's just all it's all about how useful you are to the thing they're making, Thank
you so much for being on the show. It's an important part of our show, since this is about the creative economy, to give our guests time to plug and let our listeners know how can they best support you in this endeavor. Not to cast you as King Henry VIII in a State Farm commercial, something else besides that. Steven Spielberg, if you're listening, I think I have a specific thing that you could do.
Yes, what could a listener Steven Spielberg could definitely help me out if he is so inclined on whatever his next thing is. I'm always available. But also, if State Farm wants to have me back, I'll go through another day of hell to reprise that role. I just please wait until the next year's qualifying insurance period. If you know how to spell my name, you can probably find me on Instagram, and that'll take you to my link tree, which has all the links of anything, shows that I have coming up, things like that. Connor Ratliff presents the acting class. You can find most of the shows I do, I end up putting up on YouTube for people to watch for free. Some of these have great guests. Recently, I had Rachel Zegler was a guest on the show. Jack Quaid came on, and he brought along his mom, Meg Ryan, who was a complete surprise to the audience. Patrick Wilson, Zach Cherry. There's been so many people who've done the show, and I have some people coming up who are going to be great. But also keep an eye out for, I might be coming to your town and doing a show at some point in the near future. So there's a mailing list. If you go to my link tree, that you can subscribe to a mailing list where you can get updates usually about shows that I have coming up, or if I'm in a TV show or a movie that I feel like you could support. The movie Run Amok should be finding its way towards you either in a theater or I assume eventually on streaming. Widow's Bay, of course. Watch Widow's Bay.
It's a great show.
Everyone's watching Widow's Bay. You'll find me in episode 4 as the deputy who checks in with the sheriff at one point. But probably the most important thing is the YouTube channel and the mailing list. If you're at all curious, if you're in New York, I'm often doing shows in New York City, usually at the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater. I have a show coming up at the end of July. I think, let me get the date, which is also live streamed. I'll go ahead and plug this specific date because you said this would probably come out in July, right? We're in July?
Early July.
Yeah. July 23rd, I will be doing Connor Ratliff Presents the Acting Class at the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater. And if you check back monthly, that's something you can watch as a live stream, or you can watch it in person if you're in New York City.
Well, thank you for your perspective. I think it's going to be actually really helpful for a lot of people who are doing creative endeavors to hear how you've managed to find that perspective, not to take everything personally. So we appreciate you being here today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's very cathartic.
Hey, Anna.
Yeah, Mike.
This is the part where we got to do the plugs for us.
I know you're not on tour.
I'm so not on tour. I'm so at home.
And I also know you have a new album.
I do. That's true. And that's coming out August 14th. It's called Doomed. It's a rap album about a relationship that ends in every possible universe.
Mike, are you okay?
Never. Never. And you'll hear all about it on my new rapping album.
I am glad you have a place to work this shit out.
See? And
I really am.
That's what my therapist encouraged me to do.
Your therapist, the album should come with a note.
Yeah.
My therapist told me to make this.
Yeah, well, she told me to make like the last 3, you know?
But I can see that matchup. Mm-hmm. I can see it. And my hope for you is you start to cover some new material. But you know what? It's funny. Mike, ask me about what I'm up to.
What are you up to?
So, relatedly, I finally got on a trend on my Patreon where I'm doing regular updates for a little while for the past month. Mm-hmm. I went through the phase. I was doing videos every day, and then I kind of crashed. And I've covered in the podcast somewhat, like things have been chaotic for me mental health wise. So I'm turning it into content.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
All right.
I have been keeping what I call the Lithium Diaries.
Okay.
Yeah.
How far are you into the Lithium Diaries?
I'm on week 4.
Okay.
And actually covering not just how the medication is and isn't affecting me, but also this is going to sound wild, but the kind of fascinating history of lithium and bipolar disorder. It's not a drug. It's a naturally occurring salt.
It's in like batteries.
It's in batteries. You dig it out of the ground. And it it became a patent medicine for a while. In the late 1800s, people used it. It was first advertised to cure gout, which it doesn't.
Wow. So it was just, they were lying about it.
And then it kind of became a general patent medicine and developed an association with improving mood. Although it hadn't been proven to do so yet. But Mike, how Coca-Cola used to have cocaine in it? 7-Up had lithium.
Wow, they just put all of the dope in the sodas back in the day.
Yeah, it's called 7-Up because it's supposed to improve your mood.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Wow. My knowledge of lithium was restricted to the Nirvana song before we had this conversation. So I've learned so much in such a short time.
In a short time. My joke about this is my doctor, when we were working out what to try next, she said, "Are you willing to try lithium?" And I was like, "Can you hum a few?"
Classic Gen X humor. That's great.
Yeah.
Where can people find these lithium diaries, though? Is that on Patreon?
They're on my They're on my Patreon. Anna Marie Cox Dose. And then I think I have a new video coming out soon, like a longer video, also about mental health. I'm just like you, Mike. I'm just turning it into content because that's all I can do.
So we're all pressed against the wall and trying to figure out how to make it work.
And dear listeners, keep doing whatever you're doing. We have a lot of creatives out there who are probably experiencing some of the same things we are, and we're in it together.
That's right. See y'all next week.
Past Due is hosted by Anna Marie Cox and Open Mike Eagle. It's produced by Andrew Steven. You can find more at pastduepodcast.com. Help support the show by joining our Patreon at patreon.com/pastdue. You'll get bonus content, extended interviews, and more. As always, if you like what we're doing, another way to help is by subscribing, sharing the show, and leaving us a review. Thanks for listening.
$47,000. That's what the average engine customer saves on business travel every year. That's a 26% savings, all with no booking fees. Up to 70% off hotels, 0 booking fees. Free to start, total control. Find a hotel that meets your team's complex needs. Did we say no fees? We did. That's Engine. Teams, travel, spend, managed. Get started at engine.com/savings.